Worst thing you've ever done on a first date? Went on a double date. I was with my girlfriend at the time. She brought a friend, Sarah, and I brought my friend Darren. Sarah was super into Darren. Darren was super not into Sarah. At the end of the date we were all saying goodnight and Sarah kept throwing hints she wanted to go with Darren. Darren looked at her, patted her on the head, and said okay goodnight. Darren, you cheeky sod. Went out with a girl in high school and did the usual, movie and a dinner. It had been going great up until dinner, when she stumbled over a curb. I went to catch her, and promptly whacked her in the face with my head. This actually broke her nose, which led to me panicking and trying to fix it. Of course that was a bad idea, and I think I made her nose bleed more to be honest. Thankfully she wasn't upset at me. I spent a good half hour freaking out over it, but there was a very awkward and at one point terrifying conversation with her dad when I brought her home. He was a former Marine who served in Vietnam and did the usual scare the bejesus out of the daughter's date by coming out sharpening his kabar knife when I picked her up. Needless to say he really didn't like or trust me after that. The girl and I dated for a year and we're actually still pretty good friends. So I guess it worked out okay in the end. Took this girl that did not look 16 out on a date. She dropped that she was 16 at the time and then I was just like oh, huh. When we were done with the date and I was driving her home she kept playing songs like I Want You to Want Me on my iPod and she invited me into her house. I hugged her, gave her a weird kiss on the shoulder, and said goodbye. I went on a blind date when I was 16 to dinner and a movie. We went to go see I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. I got peer pressured into taking mushrooms for the first time and never done any drugs before. I ate them with a few friends that tagged along for dinner. We went to the movies after dinner, just us two. Well, at the beginning of the movie Jennifer Love Hewitt wakes up from a nightmare screaming. I proceeded to scream and run out of the theater. The rest of the night for me finished in this order. Called dad from the payphone and told him I was tripping balls. 60s dad, he understood. Stayed in fetal position out front of the theater. Girl's dad picks her up with her crying. He kicks me angrily asking what my problem was. Dad picks me up. Dad drives me home while on the way looking at me and moving his mouth without saying anything just to frick with me. Dad tells me to go to my room and don't talk to my mom. I have a conversation with my cat and blackout. 16 and mushrooms and strangers and social situations and scary movie. I think this is actually the worst idea that has even been ideated. Took her to see The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which she had never heard of. So much butt rape. There was no second date. Went on a blind date with a friend of a friend and the first thing out of her mouth was well Sarah wasn't kidding when she said you weren't tall. Spoiler alert. I am fairly short. 5 minutes in. Told me she didn't really see it going anywhere, but proceeded to order a Grey Goose martini and a $30 appetizer for herself. Got up, said I was going to the bathroom, paid for my one beer and left. Felt great. Not something I did but something my date did. We went back to my place after dinner. Afterwards, she said something to the tune of I'm not ready to do this just yet. Put on the Daily Show. She starts talking about faith. I tell her I'm Jewish and it's not a big part of my life. She proceeds to download the Bible on my phone while I'm in the kitchen. It wasn't a date. The Jehovah's Witnesses are just getting cockier. Date went well. Was walking her home. Would have been another 2 blocks and she said you don't have to walk me home, so I said okay, have a good night. Immediately regretted my decision. We actually ended up dating for a couple months. Fine. Peace be. Ate salad in such a nervous, clumsy way that I must have looked like an alien trying on a human suit for the first time. Went to her dorm to hang out and watch a movie. We'd both never seen No Country for Old Men, and her roommate had it, so we watched it. There were no moves made during that movie. All I could think about was the Seinfeld episode about making out at Schindler's List. Recovered though. Luckily she had some horrible rom-com to put in to lighten the mood. That movie is freaking sick though. You either watch an awesome movie or bang her. Win-win. She was so hot and we were slow dancing. Got a boner. We got closer, and it blew. I went weak at my knees and she said go clean yourself up. She was gone when I came back. What a really messy first date. Never saw her again. Immediately after the date, I spent 20 minutes complaining via WhatsApp about how bad the date was. I thought I was talking to my friend with the same name as my date. It was my date and not my friend. Sad. I felt crap about it for weeks. Ended up going back to his house where he lived with his father. In the middle of the night I farted so loud I woke up him, myself, and his dad. Because you can't be blamed for anything you do whilst sleeping, I just stayed as still as possible. When we emerged from the bedroom in the morning, running into his dad, he said, "Son, you woke me up with that one last night," chuckling away. "Yeah, sorry, Dad, must have been all the beer," replied my date, winking at me. We've been together for 3.5 years now and are due to be married in 2017. Met my current GF on Tinder. We had been talking for about 2-3 weeks before we decided to meet up. Agreed that we would take my motorcycle out for a ride. Took her on a ride to a park about 20 minutes away and pretty much in the middle of nowhere. We got off the bike, sat at a picnic table and just talked for about an hour. We get up to leave and I realize I left the lights on the whole time. I'm like, crap, this battery is going to be toast. It was. I spent the next 20 minutes trying to bump start my bike, awkwardly saying I swear I'm not a serial killer. How I ended up with her is beyond me. On our first date, my boyfriend snot rocketed a huge glob of boogers so hard it splattered on the carpet of the house I was staying in at the time. Poor guy had a bad cold but didn't want to cancel the date. I love how the first line contains boyfriend and snot rocket. My mom always hated when I did that. You sound like an awesome person for accepting it. 3. Went out and got wasted. Go back to his place. Things progress and we moved to the bedroom. Let me add, this was my first time drinking hard liquor. Mezcal to be precise. So sexy times are warming up. We're both half dressed and the captain decides to pop out the front of his boxers. My drunk butt goes, holy crap. I'ma need a chair and a whip to tame that thing, make a roaring noise, then mime cracking a whip. Fell backwards off the bed doing my whip crack. Turning halfway to try and catch myself and busted my head open on the edge of his table. It drove my eyebrow ring into my head and I immediately started gushing blood everywhere. Only I'm too drunk to realize that I'm bleeding. I sit up to a facial expression I will remember till the day I die. I didn't think I'd hit that hard and just was like, what's wrong? He just said, oh my god, really quietly. I later learned I looked like Carrie and my face was absolutely covered in blood. He was actually really cool about it. His dad was a doctor and he had 3 brothers, so it was no thing to him. Just patched me up after determining I didn't need stitches and told me I was going to have a kick butt scar in the shape of a circle. I was totally mortified after sobering up somewhat and figuring I'd never see him again, but we wound up dating 4 years. Went for burritos. I'd never eaten burritos before, and what I didn't realize was that there's definitely a wrong way to do it. There's planning involved. Towards the end of the burrito, I felt something slip in the structure of my meal. It became clear that the burrito was going to slither into an unwrapped state imminently. The tin foil it was wrapped in wasn't going to stop it, and I had a choice. I could either watch my tasty treat of cheesy beef flop onto the floor, or I could eat it, or love it, right now. I didn't regret my decision, but I did have enough of a vague sense of dignity to vocalize a muffled free to my date as I fished tin foil out of my packed and leaking gob, and used the other hand to wipe a stray fleck of beef that was oozing down my beard. To compound the awkwardness, it must have been a full 1.5 minutes of silent heavy breathing through my nose before I could clear my mouth enough to more thoroughly apologize and explain. I don't know if she agreed with my choice, but I think she respected it. Thing is, there was actually a second date, and a third, and I think a fourth. No matter how disappointing you are, gentlemen of Reddit, sometimes a lady with the pout of my lean class will either be in a dry spell longer than your own, or possibly have a fetish about fat scruffy men suddenly and inexplicably fisting an entire burrito into their already stuffed and dripping maw. I never quite ruled that one out. Oh my god, if he can eat pee the way he eats burritos. 9th grade, freshman year of high school. There was a guy that everyone was repeatedly telling me apparently liked me. He had asked if I was going to the school football game a week prior, but I had just chalked it up to friendliness and answered him with an honest no. Eventually got annoyed of hearing it from everyone else. I confronted him with a blunt, "Dude, do you like me or not?" Upon his confirmation, I asked why the heck he hadn't just told me earlier. "I invited you to go with me to the football game, but you said no." "No, you asked if I was going to the game." From that interaction, we decided to go out on a first date. We went to McDonald's, where I paid for everything, and the dessert that he wanted. We then went back to the school. I tried to kiss him and he freaked out slightly. I'm talking hyperventilating and muttering to himself. We dated for a few more months before I kissed him a little too passionately one day, and upon his freak out, reconsidered dating him. We broke up the next day. I posted another tale to this thread, but this one I really need to share. In the 90s I managed a busy furniture store with lots of customers. As an attractive girl in her mid-20s, and not wearing a wedding ring as I wasn't married, I definitely got hit on. Frequently, we sold a lot of mattresses, so that alone lent itself to many awkward exchanges for me. One day I had a customer, a lovely lady in her 50s who I spent a lot of time with in the store. As we were finalizing her invoice, she went on and on about her son who had just moved into town from near where grew I up, and how I really needed to meet him. She explained how attractive he was. She also told me about his schooling and job, but really pushed his physical attractiveness, and after much badgering I agreed to meet him on a very blind date. We talked on the phone, probably on landlines. This was pre-cell phone era, and met at the pub. He was one of the most physically unattractive men I've ever met. What she described and what I met were not in the same universe, let alone ballpark. At least to me. So I talked with him for a bit, but unfortunately talking to him was like wrestling with cardboard. I'm a sucker for a sarcastic, witty guy, and no matter how he looked, if he had been a bit cocky and had a sharp sense of humor he could have won me over. But no. So I tried for a few hours to make some conversation and realized it wasn't happening, and so I found an exit point and used it. I didn't just bolt on him. I did give an excuse to leave, but at that point I learned that mothers will always think their sons are gods no matter what the kid looks or acts like. That was the first and last time I was ever set up by a relative stranger. Guy and I agreed we wanted more than a one night stand. Ended up being a one night stand. Pretty sure he played me. I'm pretty gullible. Not interesting but true. Girl in college had tickets to a rodeo and asked if I wanted to go. I don't like those kind of things, so I got super high beforehand. I hated it. It just seemed like rednecks fricking with animals the whole time. Then one of the horses jumped up and fell on its neck and just laid there lifeless. I started freaking the frick out because I was pretty sure I just watched a horse die. They had to drag it out of the arena on a fence pulled by a tractor. She insisted that the horse would be okay, but I left and never talked to her again. TLDR. Got too high. Possibly watched horse die. Or frick. When I was a teenager, I decided I was in love with a girl I was more infatuated with. My honesty got the better of me, and I kinda told her. Creeped her out so quick the butter on our movie's popcorn hadn't dried yet. Sorry Carrie. Classic schmossby. About 2 years ago I divorced my wife after she cheated with a guy she met at my mother's funeral. 6 months after the divorce I'm on my first date with a girl named Heidi. She wanted to stop by a local tavern that was hosting a charity benefit. We did. Worst decision ever. Walk in the front door and immediately I am face to face with a guy who screwed my wife. He and I grew up as friends but lost touch until he came to mom's funeral. He attempted to say something to me and I immediately cut him off and threatened him rather harshly. He left. Spent the next 30 minutes explaining what just happened to her. She said I should have punched him. She cheated with a guy she met at my mother's funeral. Classy. Well, back in college I took this girl out one Friday night. I made an effort. Some cologne. I thought I'd set the mood. So after the date we start making out. She took off my pants, but then I turned on the TV, and that's about the time she walked away from me. I know a girl who was on a first date and was having dinner with the guy someplace. Anyhow, he goes to the bathroom and she finally gets to let loose a well-deserved, smelly fart and does so. But this fart was held in for like an hour, so it lingered. When he got back he said, "Can you smell that? Smells like someone crapped their pants." She just said she couldn't smell it and was very embarrassed. Lesson to be learned: don't let loose smelly farts during dates. I met this girl online. We met. We hung out for a while. She said that she no longer felt the spark. This was fine. The problem was that I still had the whole weekend with her. I spent that whole weekend trying to get her to kiss me. Constantly begged her to kiss me as I came all of that way for her. She said no. We didn't speak for 6 months afterwards. I then moved in with her best friend. And that original girl still hangs out with me. The original awkwardness has gone. I no longer beg her to kiss me. TL. Met a girl for a drink. She's late and rude. I ditch her. So this happened a month or so ago. I'm chatting with a girl on OKC and we decide to have a drink later that evening. I get there and end up twiddling my thumbs for a half hour or so. Just as I've decided to flake and head home, in she walks in all her millennial glory. She downs 2 beers in the first 10 minutes alone. Trying to make conversation with her is like talking to a stump. The most I get is a 1 or 2 word response. On top of that, she has her face buried in her iPhone the entire time. I decided I've had it when I look over and see her browsing OKC. I finish my drink, close my tab, and leave. About a half hour later, my phone is inundated with texts from her. Once she realized that I've gone, and not just wandered off to the bathroom, she is absolutely furious. She spends the next 20 minutes telling me how bad a person I am, that cheap for not paying her tab, that I'm a pea and a creep, that I was lucky to even get a date with her, etc. Dating, A. Fell asleep. He'd got tickets to the tennis at Wimbledon. We had a lovely day, sat on the grass with plenty of pims at the ready, the sun was shining. Sun and booze equals sleepy spluddle. I would think being comfortable and content enough to nap on a date would be really nice. Went out with this chick to the movies and during the opening credits we started making out like no tomorrow. The only bad part was that she wasn't good at making out, so she had her tongue far deep in my mouth. This went on for like 10 minutes or whatever time it is till the movies start. So the movie starts and I tell her that I'm going to use the restroom. As I'm walking down I realized I had both tickets and that I can just leave her there. I ended up ditching the girl, getting my money back because the movie didn't start, and just probably left her thinking taking a huge dump. Whoa, that's honestly pretty awful. I feel so sorry for that girl. Upvoted for answering the question though. So there was this really sweet girl my buddy had been interested in but was too afraid to ask out. So donning my Captain Dong Block costume I swooped in and asked her on a date. We went out to eat and I forgot my wallet so she paid for me. Then went to a party at a mutual friend's house where I got blackout drunk and passed out and I was supposed to be the DD. My buddy was at the party and seeing my stupidity worked up the courage and asked her out. They dated 3 years. I see what you did there. Unintentional bro move. Show her how much of a douche you are and by contrast, how nice your buddy is. You set him up for the win. Freshman year college, it wasn't exactly a date but I was flirting with this girl named Lindsay at a party and she was not into me at all. I kept trying to talk to her and she would flat out ignore me. So I ended up talking to her friend Sarah and bringing her home. I used to live in the dorms and shared a room, so we ended up laying in my tub so we could hook up. Sarah stops kissing me and asks what do you think of Lindsay, and with no hesitation say she's gorgeous. She then asked what I thought of her and I paused like an idiot. Then replied, oh you're pretty. Sarah begins crying like crazy cause Eva was apparently into Lindsay. Then my roommate starts banging on the bathroom door cause she's crying so loud and basically just kicks her out cause he had work the next morning. I'm a serial online dater and I've had my fair share of bad first dates. The best one was when I put Blistex on a cold sore before a date. During the date I got nervous and started biting my lip and the Blistex went into my mouth and made my tongue numb, and consequently difficult to speak without sounding like I was hammered. Sorry about your herpes. Here's an upvote. We went for Thai food. We both got the same spicy eggplant dish. Each dish had one tiny pepper from which it got all its eat, and we dared each other to eat them. He spat his out right away. In an effort to impress him, I swallowed mine. It wasn't bad at first, and then my mouth was a cataclysm. The waiters brought several glasses of milk so I could be cogent again. Initially everything seemed okay, but then I had to go to the washroom, which wasn't terrible, but then I had to go to the washroom again, and again, and again. Half of our dinner date was him sitting alone while I exorcised this pepper from my bowels. Remarkably, he didn't seem too irked about it. We were downtown and, both being kids from the suburbs, decided to go window shopping at the local stores. We got separated briefly while inside a clothing store, which I was alright with because there wasn't much chemistry between us. Suddenly, I had to poop. I had to poop immediately. I ran to the nearest store attendant, begging him to let me use their washroom. No success. I dashed to the next store, and still found no toilet. Nothing. It was a desert and my butthole was about to rupture. Then finally a store let me in. Success. I darted down their stairs to the sweet relief of porcelain, but just as I reached it, my bowels, as if it in fit of cruelty, loosened and my underwear became filled with warm mush. Oh god. Oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god. I sat there contemplating what to do. Do I message this guy? What do I say? How do I deal with the fact that my pants are filled with poop? Why did this happen? Which god did I offend? I opened my phone. No reception. Okay, well, at least that dealt with. I cleaned myself up, slowly and meticulously. I used all of the toilet paper available in the washroom and then improvised. I went Turkish. An hour passed and I left. He had disappeared. Shockingly, I took public transit home and spent an hour on the subways and buses convinced that everyone knew. I felt marked. My friend texted me and asked why I had ditched him, and then I remembered that I was supposed to have met him directly after the date. I told everyone I had gotten violently ill. I guess, in a way, I had. And that's the story of my first date ever, when I was 15 years old. Oh David, you turned out so weird later on. I guess it was for the best. Girl shoots her pants. Calls date weird. During college I took a girl I really liked to the movies for our first date. We were sitting there chatting during the pre-trailer commercials when the house lights are all still up. During this time, I start to fidget with the cup holder between us. At one point I mindlessly reach in and grab the little cross piece at the bottom and got my hand stuck. She hadn't noticed but there was no smooth way to extract my hand. I eventually had to ask her to turn around, which given that this was a first date was a really odd thing to do. I proceeded to use my other hand to yank my hand out of the cup holder, almost hitting her in the process. I was so awkward about it I just told her what happened and she laughed hysterically at me. We actually dated for a while. At one point during the relationship we were joking about the first date while waiting for another movie to start. And yes, in the course of pantomiming the story, I got my hand stuck in the cup holder again. I don't reach in movie theater cup holders anymore. I still feel bad when I think about this. On my first date with the sweet innocent girl, whose tea were a 10 out of 10, things went well and then not so well. I took her out to dinner on a Saturday night. Dinner actually went a little too well and one thing led to another. Instead of taking her home that night I asked if she wanted to go back to my place. She said yes nervously, only that she couldn't be out too late as she had church the next morning. In reality going back to my place meant fricking in the back of my 2002 Honda Accord because my parents were home and awake around 10 PM. So after she was no longer innocent I came to the realization I have never been deep-throated. I asked her if she wanted to try it. She said yes and was even curious as she had never either. I told her to lay on her back. We established some ways of non-verbal communication, for safety of course, and gave it a go. At first it was going well. With each attempt I went further and further down, until I thought we had enough practice and it was time to go all in. Upon going balls deep I heard this awful gauging sound so I pulled out as fast as I could. Vomit immediately followed my dong. To my amazement she managed to catch most of it in her amazing tea. She almost started to cry and began apologizing. I immediately assured her it was not her fault and I was equally to blame. It was actually kind of difficult to get her to calm down. So now that she was calm I needed to work out a way to get her clean. Well, my parents are still awake so going inside with a girl who has vomit on her tea was not an option. My great idea was to use the front hose and wash her off. Well, she was now vomit free but also very wet. I went into the garage and found some mostly clean auto rags. After leaving some auto residue on her amazingly wonderful tea we decided to part ways for that night. After all, she had Sunday mass and didn't want to be tired in front of her parents the next morning. We actually dated for a couple more months until I went off to college. I thought for sure that would have been the end of us that night. Also, we both agreed we should never try deep throating ever again. Fun fact. 6 years later she is now a hardcore feminist and I am 73% sure that is my fault. TLDR. I was reminded for a second time that night what my date had for dinner. This sweet innocent girl, whose tea were a 10 out of 10. Her amazing tea. Her amazingly wonderful tea. You sound like a real charmer. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.